Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming and wanting to learn about how mold is impacting your life. I have found this tremendous in my life for really helping me know how to find out why I'm having some health issues and what I can do about it. And that's kind of like what I keep telling people. It's like, hey, that's what quantum techniques does, is through muscle testing, we're able to find out why people are having a symptom and what's going on and how they can deal with it. So it's been profound in my life to be able to know that information. So that's why I like to teach it and share it and help people be able to help themselves with that. So I'm Jody King Colegrove, and I'm a health and healing coach, and I do energy medicine and muscle testing, and I use quantum techniques as a modality, and I also have a certificate in EFT. I'm just amazed at all the things that we kind of do to help find out why people are having an issue. So I've been working with people for, over, I think it's been 15 years this summer on helping them find out why they're having a health issue. And so I've worked on lots of things. Sometimes it can be allergies and anxiety and sleep and food toxins. It can be fibromyalgia, hypertension. It can be things like weight and diabetes, things like relationships. Sometimes, those aren't going very well. And also sometimes we also deal with, money issues or sexuality. So there's a lot of things, but I love to specialize sometimes with people, helping people with anxiety, sleep issues, and digestion. So I noticed that someone said there's a little bit of background noise, and luckily my landscaper is not showing up at the moment, but across the street there is. That might be where that's coming from. Also, if you do want to mute yourself, if you're not going to have a question, sometimes that's helpful. And so that will help you guys be able to hear me a little bit better. Okay. All right. So when I work with people, I work with all ages. And so I've worked with, babies and kids and pets. And sometimes that's really helpful because they don't have a voice sometimes to be able to know, hey, why am I crying, or why is an animal itching? And so we can use muscle testing to kind of find out why they're having that issue. And that really helps how to help them, whether they've come in contact with something, whether they've got a bug bite, whether they're smelling something that's really irritating them. And so that's why, muscle testing is so helpful, because we can find that information. So I appreciate you joining me today to learn more about your health and how to take care of it. So what I wanted to talk today is about, do you got mold? I was just listening to someone talk about how, catchphrases are so important, and how that whole got milk was started. I had actually made this, this name before I heard that, but they said that campaign never really did work well. It didn't sell as much milk as they were hoping, but it's always remembered because of the slogan. So got mold is kind of the same thing, and we don't realize how much mold in our environment really impacts us. So you could be having brain fog, tired, angry, frustrated, your gut hurts, all those kind of things add to that. Okay. And so the symptoms could be coming from inside the body, or it could be from outside the body. And so that's what quantum techniques is. We can find out what it is, and so we can clean it up. So my story is that I used to live in Arizona, and in Arizona, there's not a lot of mold. We're out in the middle of the desert. They do have something called valley fever, which if you have mold spores that come in with the sand, they will get into your lungs and have an issue. A lot of times with people or pets, that isn't an issue. So they do have mold in Arizona, but it's very minimal compared to some of the other ways. And it's a different kind of mold. So then I moved to Louisiana, and Louisiana, we have a lot of mold. And so I've learned, it's been quite an education to learn how to clean it up, where to find it, how to mitigate it, and how it impacts your body. So last year, first of all, when my husband when we moved here, he said, well, the good news is that we're below tornadoes and we're above hurricanes. Well, last year we had one tornado and 2 hurricanes go through. And so they definitely impacted us. So what happened was, in the fall, we had 2 hurricanes that came through. One only turned off the electricity and the air conditioner for a day. The other one was 4 days. Well, during those 4 days, it just continued to get moist and heat up. And it was in August. And so that caused some issue. And we're sending a little bit of background noise. So Frank, I'm wondering if you can turn or make yours mute and see if that will help, because everybody else is so far is on mute, and that might help us. So if you could do that, I might be able to actually turn you off. I'm not sure if I can do that. Yeah, okay, great. All right, that took care of it. All right. So anyways, we had the 2 hurricanes go through and turned off the electricity. And so we sure enough, and there's not visible mold. I think that's the thing that people don't realize. Like, well, I'm looking at everything and I don't see anything. But a lot of times it is growing there and not aware of it. And so, so we did have to do some, cleaning of walls and stuff like that. And that's why I want to talk about this today, because it could be impacting you and you don't realize that it's there. So what happened is that happened in August, and by October, I just was not thinking really well. Projects I was trying to work on weren't getting done. It's like I couldn't make headway. I was just tired. And so all those things were leading to the fact that I wasn't doing very well. And so after cleaning up the mold, I got much better, and also doing, quantum techniques to get it out of my system. And the same thing happened this spring. Not that we had any kind of, weather disturbance or electricity out or something like that, but it's just sometimes living in an environment, your environment starts to grow mold. And so you need to mitigate it and clean it up every so often. And so the same thing happened. So I was keenly aware, okay, I know what the symptom is. So I think it's important for you to always check in with yourself and find out, what is it when you have mold in your environment? What is that symptom that gets your attention? A lot of times if we eat something bad, we know it's our gut and it really hurts. And so we can find out what that is. But sometimes mold, because everybody acts a little differently, that will be different. So just be aware of that. So we react to so we will react to things in our environment if we have toxins and pathogens and mold inside our body. So if you have more mold that you're living in an environment and then you eat mold, it's going to impact you more. So just be aware that some people don't respond to mold as much because they don't have mold inside their body. So that could be something that happens, like a wife will have more reaction versus a husband because he doesn't maybe have as much mold in his body. And it could be genetics and all that kind of stuff he's around. So we had that literal thing just happen to both me and my husband, where he got a cold and I got that he had mold in his environment. And of course I cleaned up everything that I tested, and he was more sensitive to like a sheet on our bed than I was. And so I said, okay, he's getting mold some other place. Well, sure enough, we found that the carpet in his office at work had mold in it. And so we needed to do something to clean that up. And that's what was making him more sensitive, because then he was getting it in several different places. So you can have mold exposure in many areas. A lot of times people think, oh, it's just in the bathroom or it's just in the kitchen where there's wet areas. If you have a something on the ceiling where it shows up as being a moldy spot or a wet spot. But really it can be anywhere. You can have it in bedrooms, like I said, with the blanket. Now, a lot of times we pull a new blanket out of the closet for springtime and it's been sitting in there, and so it's gathered mold. So we have to clean that up. It can also be on carpets, like I said. It can also be like in my office, I face north, and so I don't get any real sunshine in my office. And so what I found is that after a while, the mold will start growing on the ceiling. And so I have to clean it up every so often. But I've also found that if I turn the lamps on in my office, it creates enough warm air that all my talking and things like that, it will help balance that. So it's just kind of being aware of what that balance is, but just be aware that there are other places that will have mold, and it doesn't have to be a wet area like bathrooms and kitchens. Also be aware about houseplants. A lot of times the dirt will contain mold, and so you think you want to have a good houseplant for oxygen and things like that, but you want to make sure that dirt doesn't carry mold. And there are things that you can do to kind of solve that, but sometimes if it's been outside for a long period of time, it's really hard to clean up. Other things that sometimes can create it is in our cars, the floor mat where we put our feet. A lot of times that will collect mold because it's kind of damp all the time, especially if you've been in heavy wet areas or snow areas. And another thing with ceilings is, skylights and things like that can also have a lot of mold around those areas. A thing that we're seeing lately is with the fact that people were wearing masks, that's a moist area. And so not only if they have a bacteria in that mask, they're breathing into their sinuses and their mucosal lining and microbiome, but they also, it's a damp environment and create mold. And so we were checking a lot of people for those viruses and bacterias and fungal in that area. So it's important that if you have an ongoing sinus infection, that could be where it stems from. Other parts of the body where the or mold like to hang out are the liver. So a lot of times the liver, the large intestine, small intestine, and also the adrenals. But we've also found that the spine can hold mold. And so you think about, you have upper and lower spine, and so we always test that to make sure, is that clear of mold in that spine area. So I mentioned some of the symptoms with mold, but just to kind of give you some ideas, I have got some written down here. So we've got bronchitis, yeast infection, memory issues, attention span, which tends to be mine, that's my trigger, exhaustion, extreme fatigue, hair loss, shortness of breath, anxiety. And I find anxiety to me, how it manifests itself is monkey brain. In other words, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. And then I can never really quite get anything done because I'm, just kind of like overthinking in some ways. Depression, large lymph nodes, tonsils and nasal passages, have an issue or being affected. A broken arm, because sometimes it creates brittle bones. Nosebleeds, that's one that's an issue for my son if he comes in contact with mold. It's usually a nosebleed. Pain, hypertensity, bloating, eye floaters, and I've worked on several people with eye floaters that came from mold. And those are just to name a few. So you just might be thinking about, what your symptoms are and see if they are on that list or if they may have a derivative of that might be caused by mold. So we determined through muscle testing if you have mold that your body is being impacted with, both interior and on the exterior. And so that helps us know, do we need to clean something out? So if it's on the outside of the body, where is it? So sometimes people will send us pictures and say, okay, I've got this issue. Where do I need to clean up? It could be in closets, carpet, windowsills. If this is the same Rachel, sometimes it's dishwashers. And so it's just finding out, okay, where is it that we need to clean up the mold? And sometimes pictures are really helpful because you can really get at where it's at. So we don't, and a lot of times what I'll do is if someone sends me a picture, I will say, okay, like for in my office, it's like, okay, I've got 2 feet out from the window is where I'm having an issue. So I need to clean that. So instead of cleaning the whole ceiling, I just need to do 2 feet. And so that helps you, not feel like you have to, do some deep cleaning just because you found something. So do we need to just clean up on the surface or do we need to clean it behind the walls? And so a lot of times, I have a background in construction. And so I decided today to put one of my dad's designed homes behind me because it's my office here and they've got lots of papers around for little projects. And so, but a lot of times because I have that construction background, I can find out where exactly is the mold located. And so I had a client once where she had a new home, but she was having massive eye issues, especially at night. And she was getting to the point where she was going to have eye surgery. And so I tested her and found out that sure enough, the window next to her bed had mold. And she's like, well, it can't be. It's only 2 years old. Well, what happens is a lot of times when you install a window, you have to have flashing on the outside and it has to go on the outside. Then you do Tyvek and then you put down, your wood and your sheeting and then, then continue to go back to the inside of the plywood and then you've got your studs and your drywall inside. Well, at some point, insulation. So at some point in there, we have to find out where is the mold being created. Well, what happened is they had installed the flashing of the window behind the Tyvek. And so or in front of the Tyvek, and so it was behind the Tyvek, sorry. And so therefore the water was coming in and it was not filtering outside, it was filtering back inside. So that's why it's really helpful to be able to find out exactly where that is. So, I kind of said, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to take out what's underneath that window and fix that, because that's where the mold was coming in. And so there would be drywall repair and maybe some mitigation that had to happen with insulation and stuff like that. But it's good to know, because I'd rather have that kind of a repair than having her do eye surgery and know that the mold is still there and it's not going to go away. So that's why it's important to find out. So how do we usually recommend, or what way I like to recommend people to clean it up, is there's something called a mold killer, and it's done by Mineral Methods. And I'll repeat that again. So it's called Mold Killer, and it's by Mineral Methods. And the website is www.itk1.com. And they sell it by the gallon, which is, I wish they sold it a little bit differently, but where I'm at, I need a gallon, so I have no problems. But other people, maybe don't need that much. So you can do some hydrogen peroxide. I have sprayed that down on wood before to kill stuff. But you do have to clean it up until it is gone. Another thing that's really helpful to continue to prevent mold or to clean up mold is air filters. So those are things like getting some kind of a pure air, green air, I think is another one, some kind of an ozone machine. I have one that I would never live without it, because I have used it way beyond what I think its lifespan is. And so it's called Pure Air for Life. And I think it used to be like a network marketing. And now I think that it's not going, but they are still having people sell it. And I found that to be helpful. So it's called pureairforlife.biz/index. And I can always, if you send me, you want some information, you can always send me an email and I can send you those links. But I have moved that thing, in fact, just this last week, I moved it over to my husband's office, and we ran it for 2 days to clean up the mold in his carpet. And I wasn't sure if I was going to have to go back in and then clean with the mold killer on the carpet, but the ozone machine took care of it. And sure enough, the next day he came home, instead of having 25 frequencies of sludge die off, he had 10, and then the next morning he had none, and then I had 3 others. So it literally cut it. So I'm glad I found it. So boat heaters are another thing that if you do live in a moisture climate, the point is to dry out the air. So I did actually get a dehumidifier that I run in my office, and that has helped. And you can find ones that are like $35 on the internet, and that's been very helpful. But boat heaters also on the internet, or some kind of a boat store or hardware store, and they dry out the air. So they warm up enough to dry out the air, but also the lamps do that for my office too. But those are some things to kind of keep in mind to help keep the mold from growing. So that's how we kind of work on the outside. And so then there's other things that we can do to work on the inside. So those are things like taking herbs. First, obviously, it's good to identify where is the mold, how do we clean it up? But then taking herbs to help get rid of the fungal infection, I think, is really key. And I kind of do them all so I can get rid of the fungal quick. So I'm just going to kind of rattle these off. And if you want a list, you're certainly welcome to send me an email. Okay, here's a question actually that's come in about, is there a problem with breathing ozone generated air? The one I have, it's not pure ozone. This one is, some kind of a mix that's not bad. And I've never had a problem with it, but it would be something that we would want to test to make sure that it is okay. The Pure Air for Life like I said, it has just a little bit of ozone. It's not a complete full ozone. So yes, thanks for that question. So going back to the herbs, these are tinctures. There are two of them are tinctures that I think are helpful, and you can usually get these at Whole Foods or some kind of a health food store. Intestinal defense and fungus fighter. Now sometimes I've had to actually order these online from Herb Pharma, and you certainly do that too. Sometimes they don't carry, I think, the intestinal defense as much. And I see I made a note, and so there's other things called a Parasite Cleanse, and it has this. It has one of the same as one of those, and so, but it's good to have at least two of those. So intestinal defense, fungus fighter, or Parasite Cleanse. Then there's grapefruit seed extract, and all of what I just mentioned, what I do is I get a blank capsule, and then I muscle test to find out how many herbs to put of each one of those in a capsule, and then just take it. And so it's really hard sometimes. I mean, you can take the intestinal defense and fungus fighter and Parasite Cleanse with just a little bit of water, but the grapefruit extract, I've had people take it, but it's very intense. And so I find putting it in a capsule so you don't have to taste it is better. Pardiarco is another herb that is very commonly found that also helps with fungal to get rid of that. There's molecular silver, so that helps too. And miracle mineral supplement. So all of those are very helpful in getting rid of mold. So one of the questions that I had in my own questioning is, why is mold such a bigger question or issue now than it used to be? Well, what I found from a webinar that I had watched was that they actually, back in about the early 80s, started making antifungal paints and fertilizers. And just like everything that we try to control, it goes, and it gets used to it, and then it makes it so it's more, or can go around it, I guess the best way to put that. So they've kind of, it's almost like MRSA or something like that, where it's like they've created something that's almost like a super virus or a super fungal that we're reacting to a little bit more. And so that's why I think there's a little bit more issues with mold and stuff like that, especially in our homes and things like that, because they came up with that antifungal paint, unfortunately. There are certain foods that are helpful to stay away from when you have a fungal infection, because a lot of times what they do is they start growing, or they feed off, or the mold, it gives it nutrients to grow more. And so it's almost like when you take away their food source, then they kind of wither and they don't have good legs to stand up on. So if we find a fungal infection in your body, we find the foods to stay away from are yeasts, bread, beer, wine, vinegar, sugars, because obviously they love that, maple syrup, honeys and molasses, that kind of, anything that's kind of sugary. But then you also have things like fruits and grapefruits, and so a lot of times I always stop when I'm testing someone with fruits, because wait, we're supposed to eat fruits. What's going on? So there's certain fruits that have more sugar than others, and so they grow the fungal quicker. So I will always test people on the 3 foods that have less fungal. And the first one is blueberries, the next one is apples, and the next one is pears. So if you have a fungal infection, we test on those 3 things. And if you are okay on all those, then sometimes we'll go a little bit deeper and say, well, what kind of foods are you listed that you usually eat fruit-wise that are still okay for you? If you can't have any of those, then we know that we have pretty severe fungal infection that we're really needing to go after. So that's why all the remedies are helpful, laying off the foods, making sure you have a good probiotic to bring back the balance in the gut. You make sure to clean up the environment, and really usually staying off of wheat or any kind of grains and dairy that's also going to add to that. I haven't got to that part of the list yet, but it kind of really helps us know when we're testing, getting a picture of how intense it is. And we can also test, the worst you've ever had of a fungal infection in your lifetime, that's 100. Where are you on that scale? And then we can work on, okay, now after you've done some stuff, for a month, where are you? Are you moving that needle to get better? So those are all things that are helpful with muscle testing. So the other things that are good to stay off of are raisins and dates, because anytime you have something that's been reduced, it's concentrated sugar. So if grapes aren't good, then raisins aren't going to be good. Also nuts. And a lot of times I'll find out or give nut substitutes. So you think about seeds are different than nuts. So seeds would be things like chia seeds, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds. Those usually don't drive a fungal infection as much as, let's say, pecans and walnuts and especially peanuts and almonds and things like that. So we would find a nut substitute or find out what nuts you're eating are okay. Other things that can add to it are potatoes, melons, mushrooms, strawberries, berries, and I already tested that we would test blueberries. Blueberries hang on a vine compared to a lot of times raspberries. They tend to, especially strawberries, are near the dirt, and so like raspberries like that, for some reason they just seem to get more moldy than blueberries. Blueberries seem to be very dry on the outside versus berries. And then we mentioned, the dairy, high moldy cheeses, malt products. That's something that sometimes people don't realize that malts have gluten in it, but they can also kind of add. And here's another one is tea bags. Some people don't realize that there sometimes can be a lot of mold in tea bags, whether organic or not. And so it's important to kind of test your teas. I worked with a lady that she mixed her own tea, and so we had to go per barrel and find out, okay, at what point did her teas, that one has mold, and then also be aware that sometimes you'll get mold. These are the things I've learned in my life, but let's say that you're making a protein shake, and so you have that tub of great protein, and so you have the scoop, you open it up and you have the scoop inside and you scoop it out. Well, your hands may have moisture on it. And so when you're scooping, getting down in there, that scoop may have mold that's growing on it, and then it gets the whole contents bad. So I always, in my area, I have to leave the scoop up on top and not put it back in. And so that way it can have a chance to dry and not get it. So all just little weird things that I've learned living in a moldy environment. So once we've kind of looked and said, okay, these are the things that are helpful for you to eat, then we kind of check in with you and see how your diet's going and see how good the mold is going down. And we really want to get it moved significantly within a month, 2 months, 3 months. But I find that most people don't have to be on a real restricted diet if they're taking those herbs and supplements and not eating and feeding it for more than 3 months. And so it's not like a long-term thing. We're just getting the body turned around. Now, if you have a pre-existing condition, sometimes that will make it longer. I worked with when I first got into the business, I worked with an herbalist, which she kind of had said, every year you've had a symptom, then you have a month to reverse it. But with muscle testing and everything we do, we can really shorten that time. But I think that's a good way to look at it. Now, one thing I want you to be aware of is I've mentioned all these foods, and a lot of times it's like, well, wait a second. Those are things that God created we're supposed to eat. Everybody says, I was just watching a webinar this morning, eat strawberries because they're really good on vitamin C and all those kind of things. And so none of these foods that I've particularly mentioned are bad. It's just that if you have a fungal infection, they're going to continue to grow it. And where this caught me is I was like, okay, well, we can never eat these foods again. And so I went to a QT conference where I was learning how to do this. And the foods that they had served were strawberries and pineapples and watermelon. And I was like, wait a second, we can't eat these foods. They cause fungal. And Steve said, no. These will continue to grow a fungal infection. They don't cause a fungal infection in the body. So I just think it's really important that we don't demonize food, that these are bad foods. It's just that in our bodies, sometimes they don't do the best for us. So keep that in mind. So what are the tools that we can take from this? All right. So the first one is, since we don't have, we have some people here today, what I actually wanted to do is say, okay, how many of you are curious whether you have a place in your house that has mold? I thought it would be really fun to kind of test to see if there's something that you think that might have mold that we could test to see if it does. So if you are wanting me to test something, I can certainly test that. So Crystal, you said you think you might. So why don't you go unmuted and let me know where you think it might be, and we can test. Okay, looks like I have to help you unmute. So, Crystal, why don't you go ahead and see if you can put yourself unmuted? And it's at the bottom left corner. There should be like a button that shows like the microphone and then the video. And it looks like you have both turned off right now. Oh, she's having a problem with the audio on her end with her computer. So why don't you just type in then at the chat what room you think it might be. Yeah, I always think it's interesting to find where mold comes in, and sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not. So, right. So is anybody else, as we're waiting for Crystal to kind of give us an idea where that might be? Okay. So actually, she wrote in. She said she thinks it might be the kitchen, but it could be everywhere. Uh-oh. All right. So thinking about the kitchen, and I've been in a lot of kitchens, seeing that my background is construction. And so I just think about all the parts of the kitchen. So I'm thinking about the kitchen. So I think about, the faucet, and then you have usually a sink that's either over the top or it's underneath like a piece of granite or some kind of countertop. Okay. So we're thinking about, and that's where I start because it's a wet area in the kitchen. So we're thinking about where the faucet meets the top of whether it's the sink or not. Okay. So and this is how I muscle test. Okay. So I just, so thinking about that. So you do have mold kind of like at the bottom of the base of the sink where it touches whatever surface. Okay. Then if we think about the surface, whatever that is, there's also some mold there. We think about in the sink itself, I get a no. So that's on top. And then I always think of the backsplash behind that. We do have some mold there. Okay. Sometimes people have like a window seat behind that, but I'm not going to test that if there's nothing. Okay, so then I'm thinking about that's on top of the sink. So then I think about underneath. That's where all the, what do you call it, the lines and all that kind of stuff is. So thinking underneath that, I get a yes. So I think about the bowl underneath, and then I think about the hot and cold coming down the supply. Okay, and then I think about the drain. Okay, and then I think about, okay, well, so all the places underneath that sink have it. So then you also want to test to see, okay, is it on the walls? So the back wall, yes. The side walls, yes. The bottom, yes. So really that whole compartment needs to be cleaned up. So I would definitely suggest getting that mold killer and really spraying that down. I had a plumbing leak once where it was coming down the supply line. And so every day I would like spray it. Well, I sprayed it enough that it finally, kind of quit growing. And so that helped that. So that's something that you could do. All right, so let's see, check in with her. Let's see, it's a small condo, okay. So we have a water closet and under the floorboards, okay. So thinking about the water closet, and I assume that what you mean by there is, like the water heater area. So thinking about that. So we do have something in the water heater and the floorboards. So I do get that there's something there, but I want to be a little more specific and probably get more of a picture on that one to know exactly where that would be. Okay, so so hopefully, Crystal, that kind of helps you know where to start working at cleaning that up. So Susan says, I live on the water. We had mold mitigation, and the mold outside is an issue, or is the issue. I think mine is more food related. Okay. Got it. Okay. So So with Susan, let's see. So the mold mitigation that we did, maybe, Susan, can you go off mute on that one? Does your sound work?
Yeah.
Yes, great. Tell me a little bit more about that mitigation, like what room it was in and things like that.
Well, we had two gentlemen come in and they cleaned all the ducts in the house. And then they did a physical inspection. And so we had to redo two closet areas with special paint
Okay.
to, clean up whatever was there. But they at the end of the day said that it wasn't really so much the mold inside the house as it was outside. So, yeah, we were really pleased with the work that they did. But and I think, honestly, that no matter where you live, I mean, I've been looking at this for many years. That no matter where you live, there's going to be some kind of mold. It's just a matter of how much and your tolerance for whatever is there. So,
Very, very true.
but I do think mine is more, like I said, more food related.
Okay. I do get that what they, now you've described it a little bit more, it does look like they've cleaned it up from the closets and from the ducts. And so, if I just test, the inside of the house is testing really good. So that's good that they did a good job. So if you were to say, do you have mold internally? I get a yes. And so, yeah, you would want to kind of work on cleaning that up through the liver, the intestines, the adrenals. Yeah. And a lot of times I get it on the brain lymphatic system is where I have mold. And so if I eat anything with mold, it will give me a headache in that area. And so I have to clear it. And so there are certain things that I've learned how to do with, if you get something fresh from the store, you could, if it's, you kind of clean it and then you can freeze it. And so then you've kind of captured it where it can't grow mold. And, as long as you're eating it within a week, something like that, it does pretty good. So, so yeah, I think this kind of stuff would be really helpful for you to, know on what herbs to take to try to work on that, and then get rid of some of the foods that may be causing the fungal infection and try to work on reversing that.
Thank you. This has been very helpful.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Well, thank you. All right. Okay. So that's why it's really helpful to learn how to muscle test. So you can really kind of say, yeah, the workers that they came in with really did a good job and they cleaned up the areas. It helps me know that, hey, have I gotten all the mold once I've found it? So all those are really helpful. And that's why I like knowing how to muscle test, because it really does help. And I'm going to be teaching a class or a mastermind on muscle testing. So if you want to learn how to do that, that's a class that you can take. And so you can put muscle in the chat along with your email address, and I can send you some more information about that. And so, like I said, muscle testing helps you know, is it internal, is it external? What do you need to do to clean it up? Where is it in the body? It empowers you to get your health and happiness back. And it gives you confidence to know that, hey, there is a reason why I have monkey brain or I can't think very well. It's because I got something in my environment that's really impacting me. So it helps you realize, be a little softer on yourself, that, it's not all your issue. I mean, it is, but it isn't. So I think it helps to be a little kinder to yourself. So the takeaways I want you to have is that to be aware, check in with yourself and find out, what is that symptom that, that's mold. And so, and that's just a matter of really, being able to check in with yourself and being aware of what that symptom means and why it's there. And, just kind of give you an example, there's sometimes where I'll get a really good gut ache. And a lot of times in that particular area, I'm harboring anger. And so I'm just aware of, if that shows up, I've got anger that I need to deal with and know how to work on it. So sometimes our body has different communication styles with us for different issues. So it's good to be aware of what that is. So let's see here. So, and it's important, besides knowing that, is to know how to prevent mold from growing. And so, make sure there's no water leaks, or clean up where there's areas that have had water leaks. And then clean, like I say, underneath the cabinets, clean on top, so that those things are not continuing to grow mold. And I think it's important that if you have an area like my particular office that continues to grow mold, or if you live in an area that does have a lot of mold, to be aware. So like for Susan, if you know it's a lot on the outside, have a practice of making sure that, you wash your front rug every so often, that you don't wear your shoes inside. And those are going to help prevent the transfer from the outside environment into the inside environment. And so that's something that could really, help you with not letting it come inside. And so I just have like a schedule, and I actually put it on my calendar this time. Said, okay, I'm going to clean up my office after summer. I'm going to clean it up at Thanksgiving, and I'm going to clean it up at spring break. And that way I'm going to stay ahead of when that, every 3 months, which is kind of its timeline of showing up. And so that's important to kind of helpful to know. And then just know, how to clean it up is helpful. And then making sure you have a good air, filter and way to clean it up, and dehumidifier, those kind of things all really help with that. And then obviously it's important to eat healthy. We talked about the foods that can drive it, but it's important to have the things that are really helpful in your life for creating a good, balanced microbiome internal, so that can't get started. One thing I actually didn't write down here that I'm really remembering is that fungal infections a lot of times are in our bodies because of, especially in our liver, because of fear and anger. And when we harbor that or keep that emotion in our bodies, then fungal will have the chance to grow. So it's not only being aware of what we're eating and putting in our bodies, but being aware of what emotions are we harboring that we need to let go of, that are keeping us stuck. And so we have a great anxiety or treatment that we do, which is we call it a trauma technique to clear that out. But I also have a mastermind I'm doing on clearing anxiety and clearing those traumas from your life so they don't get stuck. And so that would be something to be maybe interested in. So if that's something, go ahead and put anxiety in the chat, and I can send you the information for that. So that's it. Like I said, important not to harbor that anger and rage, because those all help a fungal infection kind of stick around way longer than you want. So I wrote down here, so, I admit I love dark chocolate, and but I find that if I'm craving too much chocolate or too much sugar, that's when I have a fungal infection. So that's another one of those little key things that I'm aware of. So if I find that, then I start taking those formulas to get rid of it. And once I find it, it takes care of it pretty quickly. I mean, 1 or 2, 5 days kind of thing. So it doesn't take very long. All right. So the gift I had for you today is, if you have not been a Quantum Techniques client before, you're certainly welcome to see if Quantum Techniques or the energy healing that I do is helpful for you. And so you could sign up for a 15 to 20 minute kind of exploratory Zoom call that's free. And that helps us know if the things you're dealing with, if you have, if this modality would help for you. So like with Susan, I'm not sure if you are a Quantum Techniques, and Crystal, if you're clients, but that might be something that you kind of see, hey, how much fungal do I have, and what's the best herbs to get rid of it, and do I need to do certain things that I'm not aware of, or where to clean up. And so those are all things that we can kind of help find out how, if this modality worked for you. So if that's something that you're interested in, let me know. Send me an email at jody@quantumtechniques.com, and we can kind of arrange that so that we can get you some answers. So what I do at Quantum Techniques is I help people get their health and happiness back. And so we find out through muscle testing, what toxins and what pathogens are blocking your body. And so they could be things that you're eating. They could be inhalants like mold. It can be other inhalants or things you put on your body like lotions and things like that, that are really not helping your body heal. And so they're keeping you in a non-healing state. And maybe they also are preventing you from getting healing. And so there's these non-healing issues that just won't go away. And we can find out what that is and why it's getting in the way and what you can do about it. And we also deal with the emotions and the beliefs. We talked a little bit about fear and anger and rage impacting you, but there's also beliefs that we might have. The world's not safe. And so if we feel like we have mold on the outside, and then we might be living more in a fear state, and that might be impacting our health and not helping our immune system be very strong. So those are all things that we look at when we're working and doing a session, looking at the physical issues, toxins, physical issues of pathogens, and also the non-physical issues that are bothering you. So I'd like to open it up for questions if anybody has any questions about what we talked about. So if you do have more, let me know, or any other questions. I'm just checking the time here. We're getting close. So we got a chance to answer Crystal's questions and some Susan's. So let me know if you guys have any more. We've had an issue with that. So, all right. So we do have a question that's come in. Okay, so I'm not the fastest reader, so bear with me. So Rachel's asking, do you recommend activated charcoal or bentonite clay for removing fungal from the body? All right. So everybody's body is different, okay? And I think that's what's so fun about what I do. So I tried activated charcoal, and it about took me out for a month. And I don't remember the symptoms, but it was definitely enough to say I will never do that again. But a lot of people swear by it. So it's just particular. It could be the type I took, for the duration I took, which is kind of ringing through in my mind. So it really, like I said, it depends on the person, because I know a lot of people really do like that. There's other remedies that I have found to be more universal that everybody works on everyone. A lot of times people talk about zeolite for getting rid of fungal and detoxing, and that doesn't work for everybody. I found someone yesterday it worked great on. So that's why it's important to muscle test and to know. Bentonite clay, I have some in my cupboard and I haven't used it yet, so I haven't tried that one yet. But I would say that both of those, lots of people recommend and kind of say that they're good. So it would be something that we would muscle test to find out if it's specifically how helpful it would be. Yeah. So then Crystal is asking, or citrus penicillin, or citrus peptin, humid or fulvic acid. I've tried fulvic acid, kind of had the same response. It was good for a couple days and then it kind of quit. And sometimes people do have that situation where an herb will test good for a while and then it will start detoxing maybe too quick, or it's reached its ability in the body, or the body has had some traumas that make herbs go bad on it quickly. So again, muscle testing is really helpful with that. The citrus peptin, I don't have as much information on that one, or the humid. So yeah, I'd have to check. A lot of times that's what people do, is they've done their research and then they give me a whole list and they say, okay, these are what I'm thinking might be good. Which ones test good? And so I'll go through and test, okay, for the symptoms we're trying to look at, does this one test good, or is it harmful? How much benefit? So if it's above a 5, then yeah, you're spending some good money for something that's really going to help your body. If it's only a 1, I wouldn't probably spend the money for it. If it's a minus harm, you probably don't want it in your body. So we can test that. Yeah, I'm sorry, I have not heard of humic acid. Thank you for clarifying that. I may have to look that one up. So that's why I love to learn from my clients too, because they always have done more research than I'm aware of. And so it's fun to learn new things. So I'm going to look that one up. So thanks for the info. Okay, so you're saying that the humic acid goes along with the fulvic. Okay, so those are combined, it sounds like. So yeah, so another thing that we do is like, okay, let's say we find 5 things that are good for you. Well, do we need to have all 5? Or if 4 are good and the 5th one is not so good, or the combination doesn't do good, that's how we can test also to find out if that combination for your specific symptom is helpful. Okay, she's saying she thinks it's familiar or it's similar. Okay, well, great, guys. So if you are, if you have someone that would like to come to QT and try that, we have a new client special of $300 to do 60 minutes worth of sessions to kind of find out which of these herbs may be helpful for you and which areas have mold, and if you're dealing with mold and what you can do to get rid of it and out of the body. So you're welcome to sign up for that. We have a new website at quantumtechniques.com. We kind of revamped it over last year, and so that came out this early spring. So it's fun to check out because it's got a lot of new stuff on there. We do have, or I personally have, a YouTube channel that has lots of information and videos on different things that we work on, or that I work on. And so it's fun if you have a situation that you're wanting a question about, you can kind of research what it might be there. So, whether it's kidney stones or whether it's dealing with skin issues, pet issues. So I have a lot of things in there, and just general health information. So you're welcome to join that channel. Quantum Techniques also has one too. And so they have a variety of different videos that we've done throughout the years also. So that would be one to check out. So both of those are YouTube channels. I have my Facebook page, which is Health and Happiness Through Muscle Testing. And I offer a lot of information on there, and just motivational things too on how to take care of your health. And then I also have a group page, which is Health Puzzle Academy. And so that's where I really kind of announce some of these webinars that I do, and also the masterminds, and get you information. We can have more of a dialogue on kind of what you're dealing with and questions. And so it's really fun to kind of talk to the people there that are interested in health. Well, we're nearing kind of the end, and so I just want to know if anybody has any other questions, but it's been great to talk with you guys today and answer some of your questions and help you kind of get some answers about whether mold is impacting your life. Yeah, if you have any other questions, let me know. So Susan says, thank you so much for your time, and it was great information. Well, good, I'm glad. It's mold is dear in heart because I've learned so much about it over the last year. So I just don't want anybody else to suffer through the brain stuff that I've had to deal with. So Crystal says, thank you. So great, Crystal. It's great to have you guys here, and I'm glad I can help share. So Ron says, thanks for the great information. So, well, good, guys. It was really fun to have you here today, and I just hope that you have a blessed rest of this week. And hopefully you can get that mold cleaned up real soon so you can have your health and happiness back. All right. So live and joy, guys. Blessings.